Welcome. I'm Jessica Tietjen, and this is the Evolving to Exceptional podcast, where we talk about reaching peak performance in our workplaces, homes, and communities so that we can live our best life possible, an exceptional life. I want to welcome back all of our Evolving to Exceptional listeners to this week's episode of the Evolving to Exceptional podcast. This week, we have a fantastic guest with us, Nikki Thompson. She is the Director of Training and Development and has a fantastic story that I'm really excited for you to tell our listeners about. And it's a story that is going to lead into the topic that we're going to focus on today, which is about overcoming challenges and adversity and developing that capacity and capability for resilience. And resilience is a word that's gotten, I think, a lot of press in the last few years, but I'm not sure that everybody understands it as well or as deeply as we should in order to really cultivate it both in ourselves and others. But I think your story is going to help us to do that and to talk about why that's so important in today's world. But before we get into it, Nikki, would you tell our listeners just a little bit about who you are, what you do, and why you do what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of like you said, Nikki Thompson, Director of Training and Development for a fire protection and life safety engineering firm. So I've always been in the people industry from the beginning. I knew I wanted to do something to help people and to understand. And the journey has been quite interesting from, everything from going to college to get a psychology degree and a master's in human services to then transitioning into the corporate world. I've dabbled in restaurants, I've dabbled in social services. And so I've seen the full life cycle and been able to support that piece as well too with people. So lifelong learner, I think is the biggest thing if I could describe myself. Always looking for new ways to grow and evolve myself to better support the people that I get the pleasure of coming in contact with.
I love how you connected to kind of your mission and your passion and what's important to you. And you said a little bit about your diverse background, but maybe tell our listeners a little bit more about that story and how that's kind of connected to or maybe made you more passionate about how to overcome adversity, the importance of developing and how you approach challenges to help you develop resiliency.
Absolutely. Well, not diving super far back into my childhood, but I think it's something kind of important to mention. I was the first in my immediate family to even consider college, let alone go to it. So my grandfather, he was such an interesting, inspirational person, a little quirky, if you may. But he was so fascinated by people and the human mind and why they did the things that they did and how to get the best out of them. And so I always thought that was fascinating. So I knew I wanted to go to school to kind of dive into that a little bit. So that kind of started my educational journey and my other people when I went to college for psychology. So I got my bachelor's in psychology with a emphasis in family services. And then after, those 4 years, I took a little bit of time off and worked in the social services field, did a lot in foster care case management. I was a child abuse neglect investigator for the state of Missouri for a short period of time and knew I wanted to continue kind of on that journey because it was still on my cup, but it wasn't quite checking all of the boxes. I felt like there was just a little bit more there I wanted to do and was really looking for my specific calling. So I then went and got my master's in human services. And from there, as we all do, interestingly enough, we got to pay for college, right? So I was working in the restaurant industry while I was getting my master's. So I was working 2 full-time jobs, kind of just to make ends meet and to be able to do the things that I wanted to do. And it started off there with just me saying hey, there's an opportunity to train folks. And I don't know if I volunteered myself or was voluntold in a position, but I kind of stepped into that role and they saw hey, you know what, you're kind of good at this. We're seeing an increase in our folks and just our culture and things like that. So that slowly transitioned to being able to support a few more restaurants, which then, as luck would have it, when I got my master's degree, which had nothing to do with training and development, essentially. I took on a corporate position as a corporate field trainer within that restaurant industry. I loved every minute of it. I loved every minute. And I felt a fire within myself of just getting to connect with so many different people from so many different walks of life, in so many different stages of life too, which was the most like invigorating part of it, is just getting to connect and knowing that I had, even if it was a small portion, just a small piece of their journey, and was able to support them through that. And from there, it kind of evolved. I went from that career to another career in training and development. Met some really phenomenal people along the way who saw my potential. Because I always say it takes an army to raise kids, and it takes an army to grow an adult too. So, it's a village, and you build your village, which I did. And I've had a lot of help along the way to kind of bring about opportunities that, had I not made those connections with those folks, I don't know that I would have had. So that's led me here today to be the director of training and development for our firm. And I wear many hats within that role. But at the end of the day, it's all about people. It's all about making sure that people feel great and the people continue to be put in a space where they feel that they can grow to their true potential, whatever that may be.
So give kind of your background and experience in a variety of different spaces, some really tough in the social service space, certainly. What is it that you've maybe noticed about what keeps people from their full potential, or from fully developing and growing and thriving in their workplace, but just kind of their life in general? Are there any themes that maybe you've noticed, or of what has come up repeatedly that gets in the way?
Yeah, I know, but that's a great question. I think looking back at just all of the different areas that I've worked in and working with people in different stages of their life, the one thing that I've seen that's consistent is really how we address or adapt or reframe the situation and experiences that we're in and that we're presented with. When something is put in front of us, whether it's a challenge or an opportunity, we have the option to choose how we process it. We have the option to choose how we look at it. And all too often, we're our biggest critics. People are. It's looking in that mirror and not being as positive and not being as supportive as we really should. And so a lot of times what I've seen is just getting in our own way, just based off of how we're looking at the hand that we've been dealt. Everybody gets a deck of cards, and how you choose to use them is really up to you.
Yeah, I used this analogy with one of my clients the other day around this of, it's almost as if we all kind of have like little hooks or thorns, if you will, sticking out of us, right? We've all had our experiences that have created and shaped certain beliefs, certain ways of feeling, reacting, experiencing, and interacting with the world. And when we show up to the workplace, our thorns, our hooks, end up getting hooked on other people and impacting each other. And so it creates this friction between us, right? So instead of flowing with each other with ease and engaging around the work that we're doing and having it feel good, instead there's all of this overthinking or this emotional reaction to different situations, or hyper action taking that maybe isn't well thought out. And there's all these maybe negative patterns that play out because of those experiences that have shaped us. And I use that kind of an analogy, but really those are our inner neural patterns, the way that we wired up, that then creates the way that we view and experience the world and the way that we interact with other people in it.
Absolutely. I think all too often we're naive to think just because they wear a different hat when we come into work and we might feel like a different person, we sometimes forget that we're still bringing the same thing in the door, and we still truly are underneath all of, the suits and the ties and all that stuff. We still are that same person, and how things affect us outside definitely can affect us inside. And so being self-aware of what we're bringing to the table, I'd never like to say baggage because it's not baggage, because it's our own luggage, I guess. But yeah, and it's okay. It's okay. We are who we are, and we should be empowered and feel comfortable to show up authentically as ourselves and be able to navigate all of the amazing things that we bring to the table, and some of the things that might be challenges for us too, and see them as opportunities to grow.
I like what you said about people should be able to show up authentically and grow and learn from their experiences and not have to hide or put away parts of themselves. And also, we know that isn't always a conscious choice, right? And that not all environments are actually safe to do so. And
Mhm.
so, if people show up into an environment where there's a lack of safety, there's a lack of systems and structure that support them showing up in that way, then that will trigger their embedded pattern, their embedded
Yeah.
neural pattern to protect themselves. And so I think that's where a lot of times we see people armor up when they go into the workplace, and actually that does a lot of damage because it prevents connection. If I'm armored because I'm protecting myself, I also can't fully connect with or relate to you on a neurophysiological level, right?
Absolutely. And that's one of the big things, especially in my current role, that I try to educate on because it is so important. Psychological safety can really make or break not only a culture, but a business in general, because we want people to show up and get the job done. Well, to be able to do that, they have to be able to be authentic. They have to be able to feel comfortable and confident in everything that they do, or else there is going to be the ceiling that they're going to have to climb over. And so working with leadership teams to make sure that we continue to try to create those environments for folks and then leave it up to them. But at least the runway is clear as much as it possibly can be. That's the important, and that's the true, I would say, the true special sauce when creating or just a really great work environment where people feel that they can thrive in.
When I would pull that probably down even one layer deeper from just psychological safety to what I like to call embodied safety.
Mm.
So, not just that we are doing or saying the right things, but that we are actually being safe in how we interact and relate. And we've all felt this before. We've all had this experience before where someone is saying all of the right things, right? They
Mhm.
say all of the things you'd want someone to say to be safe and to walk through the, process of how do you demonstrate empathy. But it doesn't feel like genuine connection because it's not, because we can say and do the right things, and underneath it all, our intent is not real. And then we feel that in other people, right? We
Yeah.
recognize it. And it can actually create even more harm, I think, because it makes us really uncomfortable. We're like, they're saying everything right. I feel like I'm supposed to trust them, but there's something inside that's telling me, no, don't trust them. Like
Mhm.
there's something not connecting. And so then we go, do we deny our own internal sense of a situation, or do we trust our internal sense? And so it creates more disharmony and more than rumination in people of like, well, is it safe or is it not safe? Like, what does this mean? And so I think when it comes to leaders, you're right. It's so important. And also, they have to realize that it's not just about them checking boxes, it's actually about them being a safe leader and leading
Mhm.
with embodied safety in how they interact and relate to people every day, all day.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. There's always at least one people champion in any room that you go in. You just have to figure out who that is. And that is the person that might not be the highest performing person out there, but it's a person that can genuinely connect with people. It's a person who makes people feel good, and who creates that environment. And so, if we're working with leadership teams, understanding that might not be, unfortunately, they might not be the person, and that's okay. So, in finding that person is how we get people to really, really feel comfortable in whatever we do, even in families, even outside of work and stuff like that. There's always that, we can always think back to that one person within the family that just makes you feel like a warm hug, or just makes you feel like, hey, you know what? When something is going wrong, I can talk to this person. I can open up to them. They're out there. We just need to empower them to help others and give them the platform to be able to do so.
So maybe you could tell me a little bit about what you've noticed in terms of some of the challenges that people are currently experiencing that create this difficulty with having resilience or this difficulty with bouncing back. And I always like to define resilience and separate it from simply endurance, because a lot of times I think people think of it as only endurance. But resilience is really the capacity to adapt, recover, and grow in the face of stress, adversity, or significant challenges. And so it's more about the recovery and the growth than it is about enduring hardships. It's not just about always pushing through, it's actually about evolving through. And so I'm curious a little bit from your perspective, where do you see some of the challenges in today's world, or what do you see in people that requires more of this resiliency?
Yeah, I think, things have gotten so complicated in the world. I think if you think back to 10 years ago, what our biggest problems in the workforce was then, and you look at now and you're like, whew, how did we get here? And I always say that when we're at a crossroads, we have the opportunity to think about it in many different ways. We can think about it as this is a challenge. I don't have the energy for it. We can think about it as, why did this happen to me? Go down that really deep, dark hole that we all too often do because we're our biggest critics. Or we can reframe it in our own minds and look at it as, okay, I was given this because there's a lesson within here. And I think we're in such a fast-paced, moving world that taking the time to really stop and see or try to uncover what the lesson is just not top of mind always. We just don't have the time. And so I think that's the biggest challenge I'm seeing out there is just seeing everybody be able to take the reflection time that they need to say, okay, what is the lesson here? What am I meant to learn from this? Where am I meant to grow to from this? And then changing how we look at challenges to be opportunities versus something that's been thrown at us. We're not a little peg on a dartboard with something throwing it at us. We're the thrower. And so we're going to miss from time to time. But when we do land it or we do miss it, there's a learning moment there. And so I think that's the biggest thing that I've seen. And that's the thing that I try to help people with the most of, okay, how are we looking at this? Are you looking at this as a negative? Sure. You got to know. You asked for a promotion. You got to know. Okay. That's a learning moment for us. How do we show up differently? How do we change? How do we grow? How do we evolve? We can't let those challenges, those bumps in the road stop us from doing what we feel we were meant to do in life. And I get it. When you get so many of those no's, it gets really deflating, really defeating. And then we almost build up that wall that you were talking about, that armor that we put on where I'm not going to step up because unfortunately I've been told no, or I've been shut down so many other times. But we have to help people to keep pushing. We have to help them to see the light at the end of the tunnel because you need those no's to get to the yes. How do you get to the yes? You grow, you evolve, you learn from those no's. And so that's the biggest thing, I think, is just slowing down really to be able to change our mindset of what's happening to us. Why is it happening to us? And how do I make the most out of this experience? Because it's here. We can't change it. Right? I always tell people, if you get it now, you're going to get it. At least you have an answer. And it gives you somewhere to start.
Well, and I think what you're describing is what Cy Wakeman and others might refer to as learned helplessness. And I don't know if you've ever seen the fleas in a jar example. Have you seen this before? So this experiment where they put fleas in a jar and fleas will jump, right? And if you put the lid on the jar, eventually the fleas will stop trying to jump. They won't jump all the way to the lid because they learn that the lid's there. Even if you take the lid off the jar, the fleas still won't jump out of the jar. But what's even crazier is that when the fleas reproduce, their offspring will also not jump out of the jar, even though the lid isn't there. So there's something that happens in our neurophysiology where we embed a pattern like you're talking about, like you get so many no's that you learn that you can't go that way or that that pathway isn't open to you. And then we stop trying and then we run the risk. So we have to challenge ourselves. And I did this with a client the other day. And I said, do you really know that pathway is not open to you? Or has it just been that way for so long that you haven't tested it? That you gave up on trying to test it. And so I think there's a real element there of checking ourselves against what we believe to be true or what maybe we've experienced in the past and what might actually be possible if we change our thinking in the future.
I love that. We use that. Don't be a flea. You can grow and go, well, no, it's so true though. I think we adapt almost too well in some situations. So that way we change. But For me, especially the way that I was growing up and the challenges that I kind of faced to get to where I'm at today, I really had to push myself to say, like, I don't want ceiling. I never want a ceiling because I don't know what my true potential could be. I think the thing that helped me out the most too is I had really amazing people along the way that believed in me, even at times more than I believed in myself. People that saw the spark, people that kind of pointed it out and said, hey, you know what? I think you would be phenomenal at training. And then was like, no, I don't want to go into training. I want to talk about lying. And it's so important too to make sure that people that you surround yourself with are the people that are help uplifting you in those moments where you do get stuck in your own way. We just stop the car. We need them in the back seat. That's like, no, let's go pedal to the metal. And so I think the people aspect of it too really can help us get beyond, even where we think we can.
I think it's huge. And it's huge actually on a neurophysiological level too, because when we connect with other humans, we activate not only our networks, but our mirror networks of them as well. And because we live within our own neural networks, our own pathways, the way that our neurons are wired in our body, we actually can't see beyond them, right? Because they are the lens through which we see and experience the world. And even earlier when you were talking about self-reflection is super important. And also, sometimes we can't see in ourselves something until someone mirrors it back to us, until someone else points it out, right? So with my client, until I pointed it out, he would maybe not have seen that as a self-limiting belief that he had developed over time. He would have believed it as truth and had it continue to exist that way. And I think one of the things that has been really challenging is that there's so much distrust and discord between people and relationships. And there's a lack of people trained in how to really engage well around these types of conversations, these growth-based, identity-based, learning-based conversations. And leaders are so overwhelmed, like you talked about. They're so busy. They feel like they don't have time. They're not spending as much time with their people. And so those opportunities for the mirror back, and not like they have to be hour-long conversations, right? It can be a 15-minute or a 5-minute reflection back that shifts how you're thinking, shifts how you're feeling, has you create an insight and a learning and a new way of being comes out of it, a new way of thinking, feeling, or behaving. But I think we have a lack of that. We have a resistance to really engaging with other people on a deep and meaningful level in a growth-based way. And a lot of people will just say, well, that's the leader's job. And then the leader doesn't have time to do it. So it just doesn't happen. Has that been your experience?
I think, yeah, some of that. And I would also say too, I think that there's a fear there that I'm seeing of a fear of, like you said, the lack of education or knowledge around how to do it the right way. And so there's a fear where like, I don't want to do it wrong. I don't want to make the situation worse. So the easy way out is then to do nothing, which we all know is actually the worst of this situation. I think it's definitely an opportunity across the board. I think it's going to continue to be an opportunity for leadership teams to get themselves to a place and a space where they have enough tools to still be able to provide a level of support to their teams, but then to be able to lean into those experts that know how to do it and know how to do it well and be comfortable and confident with kind of relinquishing that to somebody. Because I think back to leaders that I've had in the past, they kind of held everything really close to the chest. And it was my responsibility to do this and my responsibility to take care of that. And it was a really hard awakening at times to realize like, hey, I might not be the best person to do that. And we have to create that environment where that's okay. Everybody is a subject matter expert in their own right, but we should be even more so in today's society to be leveraging other people who have more knowledge and who can really help us because the work's not going anywhere, right? We're all so busy. And so we have to change and evolve what it means to be leaders and what it means to be workers and be okay with seeking out help sometimes.